Well, good morning. Birthday week. Today is the 27th of April. And today is day 70. We've made 7 blocks of 10 days happen. Woke up a little tired, still a little sore. I know that coming off of Clomid, I should expect to have some issues. Again, it's another one of those drugs that messes with hormones, so I've been expecting to feel different. And I'm not sure if I have or not. To be honest, I'm not sure if the Clomid even really had much of a chance to kick in, other than the mood effects that I had with it. The doctor, the urologist that I spoke with, said that it's unlikely that it would have affected fertility or anything, because I was only using it for about a month and a half. So I'm hoping that things sort of stay on an even keel. It's been difficult to manage those changes enough without having to go backwards through those changes again. So yeah. Anyway, wee bit of a frog in the throat this morning. I got banned from a subreddit for racism. It's nothing related to marijuana or video games, but I did want to cover this. A video looks like it was on the Pussy Pass Denied subreddit. It was 2 young black women in a store who had shoplifted and then were trying to just leave, and the security was keeping them in, and so they had a complete temper tantrum about the fact that they weren't being allowed to leave with items that they had stolen. And then a cop goes in and tries to make an arrest, and they resist, and of course it turns into it devolves into essentially into a wrestling match. And the post was labeling these 2 as women. I said, well, the post that I made was to call these 2 women is akin to putting a bow tie on a poo and calling it sir. Now, for anyone who is hypersensitive about race, and anyone who is looking to find race in anything, I can see why that might be construed as racist. But the purpose of what I was saying was that these women, to call these 2 females women, is as ludicrous as dressing up a poo and calling it sir. And the judgment wasn't about the skin color at all. And I guess maybe the notion of the fact that poo is brown maybe is the link there. The notion is that the behavior of these women was not indicative of their status as women. It was indicative of pieces of shit. And that was the comparison that I was making, was that essentially these women were actually pieces of shit, and calling them women was ridiculous, like calling a poo with a bow tie on it sir. But I was banned from the subreddit for that permanently, and then they muted me for 28 days so that I couldn't respond to the ban and argue the point that I was making, which led me to believe that whoever had made the ban understood that there was probably more nuance there that they couldn't understand, and they didn't want to have to deal with a conversation about it. But it was funny because when I saw that, it struck me again as that, and I've talked about it. I've written about this a little in the second book that I've been writing, about how there's been a degeneration of the ability to have conversation, and how that has contributed to people having less understanding or appreciation for nuance. And how here's another example. When we were in Fiji for my brother's wedding, there were kids everywhere because it was a kid-friendly resort, and all of my brother's friends had kids, and they all came with their kids, and Angie and I we decided that we were going to stay on the kids resort, at the kids resort, so that we could be close to everyone else. And one night, one night where it wasn't quite as windy as it had been the other nights, we were all sat outside, and the kids were running around like crazy. Like, and when I say kids, I mean like, there must have been probably at least 50 different, maybe even 80 different families with multiple children, maybe even 100 with multiple children. I mean, there were hundreds of kids on this island, or at least on this section of island. And I used the term yard apes. My first father-in-law, used that term to describe kids, and I'd heard it being used in Ohio, and I used the term to describe the kids that were running around because they were yard ape age. They were all sort of, like between between 3 to 6, 4 to 7 maybe. Screaming, loud, not really in control, not really socially aware yet, sort of just like little balls of chaos, monkeys in clothing essentially. And not one of these kids was a colored kid, by the way. This was, this is in Fiji at a resort. It was 99% white kids and maybe 1%. I think my brother and I saw like one, or sorry, Angie and I saw one Aboriginal family that was there, maybe. But when I used the expression, everyone at the table like stopped and looked at me and was like, "That's a pretty harsh term to use, don't you think?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Well, that's kind of racist." And I'm like, "How is it racist to call a bunch of kids yard apes?" Like, I'm not singling any of them out. I wasn't singling any of them out as individually as apes because, and I guess after I explained myself, they understood. But at the same time, that sensitivity to the word and the verbs, or not the verbs, the verbiage, they jumped on it faster than their critical thinking jumped on it. And I think this is the same thing that happened here, because I actually got quite a few upvotes for the post. And a couple of people actually thought it was. I mean, it was meant to be funny. It was meant to be like the image of putting a bow tie on a poo and then going, calling it sir. Like that, the absurdity was the point. Because these women weren't acting like women. They were acting like pieces of shit. They were stealing from some 7-Eleven and trying to leave, and then having giant temper tantrums when they weren't being allowed to leave with the things that they had stolen. But of course, I'm the monster. Anyway, what it is to me is a reflection of is how I think COVID has made it worse, but I think the social media and the internet in general was really the killing blow here. Is that nuance gets thrown out the window, and like when you're having conversations with people that aren't really close friends, you have to police what you say now. Like you actually actively have to censor yourself, and rather than allow your friends group to sort of police you on the things that they think are and give you a platform with which to explain yourself too. People are far more likely to jump on board early and accuse you of racism because of the hypersensitivity that we have now towards it. Particularly white people. I find that there's an urge for them to make themselves heard as if they're allies or something. Anyway, it was disappointing. It's a sub that I liked to go to. It's always fun to see women who step out of line get corrected or put back into line. Just like it is to see, Justice Served is another good one of those subreddits where you see people who are acting like fuckwits get corrected. But on Justice Served, you don't get to see it from the women's side because, of course, that's misogynistic, whereas on PPD there was always those types of videos. And to be honest, I never thought that would be a subreddit that would ban me, but I guess I guess hypersensitive people exist in that place too. Um, so yeah. As far as quitting the drugs and the video games are concerned, um, I've been thinking a lot about the talk that I had over the weekend, and I feel like what I said was right about the dope. I had another dream that I took some edibles, and then when I came out of the dream, I woke up thinking to like immediately after I woke up thinking, ah shit, I didn't even make 70 days. And then I realized it was a dream, and I was very relieved. So that felt good. But the video game side of it, I've been noticing when I'm bored now, the last few days, and it could just be a mood. It could be mood related, and I think that's one of the traps I think I've talked about before, where when you're feeling maybe a little down, or you're feeling a little sort of tired, or your body's worn out, and you have that slightly depressed sort of sense, that video games pops up as a way to ameliorate, a way to sort of stave off some of that poor feeling. And as a result, I've had some thoughts about playing games recently that have been a little harder to block out. So I've had to go do more physical things to kind of remedy that, which has been difficult with the fucking sore calf muscles. Off topic, I watched Mortal Kombat last night, the one on HBO, the new Mortal Kombat movie. I can safely say that it is as bad as the first one. But some of the fatalities and some of the finishing moves and some of the fight scenes are quite entertaining. Everything else is terrible, but they are good. So yeah, if you can get it without paying for it, I suggest having a watch for a laugh. Anyway, that's it for me. Ka kite.